theme, Behold, I Come. Now, these first 5 vials that we've read this evening out of Revelation chapter 16, verses 1 through 11, are all about, brothers and sisters, God's judgment on Catholic Europe. They're all about bringing an end to an empire that had existed for over 1,000 years. And God is going to raise up a man of destiny to bring blood to drink. Or you pick that up in verse 5 of Revelation, or verse 6 of Revelation chapter 16. And you read this: For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. And God was going to use this man as a vessel to bring blood to drink for those who persecuted the prophets. And therefore, brothers and sisters, this man who emerged from the French Revolution was 20 years old when the French Revolution broke out. And he, as a teenager, saw this out-of-control train coming down the tracks, and he used the French Revolution to catapult him to stardom. He truly was, brothers and sisters, a man of destiny. He was, historians tell us, the greatest commander, the greatest military tactician since Alexander the Great. He was a remarkable man, as we shall see, that God used to raise him up. He was a man of destiny. But you know, brothers and sisters, he had a few problems. Napoleon was born there in Corsica. And the reason that was a problem is because a few years before Napoleon was born, the French came in and conquered Corsica. And therefore Napoleon grew up absolutely detesting the French. Do you believe that? And the other thing, brothers and sisters, about Napoleon is that he could hardly speak the French language. He had a thick Corsican accent. And the other problem that Napoleon had was he was only 5'6". That's about there. So here, brothers and sisters, you have a man who hates the French, can hardly speak the French language, 5'6", and 10 years after, the French people went mad with bloodlust, saying we will never, ever, ever have a despot reign over us. 10 years after they rallied together in the French Revolution in 1789, in 1799, this man, hater of the French, can't speak the language, 5'6", comes in and says, I am your chief consul, soon to be your emperor. Brothers and sisters, that would never, ever, ever have happened in the normal course of things, but God was in control. The angels were at work, raising this man up against all the tide of normality. He raised him up to come in and to take and to conquer and to be the emperor of the French people. He was, brothers and sisters and young people, the heir to the revolution, and he reorganised and conquered most of Europe, reorganising France and conquering most of Europe. Now, before we look at Revelation chapter 16, I'd just like to show the important link between chapter 11 and chapter 16. Now, we've, over the last couple of evenings, been looking at chapter 11. And you're now going to see why chapter 11 becomes that springboard into chapter 16. And there is a very, very important link. Now, we have seen over our last couple of evenings together that with the second great earthquake of chapter 11, the French Revolution, we saw in Revelation 11 and verse 14 that the second woe is past, that is, the sixth trumpet. And behold, the third woe cometh quickly, which is the seventh trumpet, which would contain the 7 vials, which we're talking about here in Revelation 16. Now here's the thing. When you read Revelation 11 and you read verse 14, as we have it on the screen, so here we are, we're reading Revelation 11 verse 14, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. If you want to follow the chronology of the story, you would immediately turn over to Revelation 16 and verse 1, and you would read the detail of the third woe. So chronologically, we would read verse 14 of chapter 11, and we'd spring straight into chapter 16, verse 1, and we would continue the story about the third woe. Question: if that's the chronological link and the flow of the history of the story, why then, in Revelation chapter 11, do we have verses 15 through 19 in the way, interrupting the flow? Well, typically of the apocalypse, God gives us an overview. Once introducing us to the third woe, or the seventh trumpet, in verses 15 through 19, we're given a broad brush overview of the seventh trumpet, or the third woe. All right? If the chronological flow is from verse 14, chapter 11, springing us into verse 1 of chapter 16, then why is chapter 12, 13, 14 and 15 in the way? Why does God put those 4 chapters interrupting this smooth flow of the story? One of the reasons, brothers and sisters, is this. When you're in chapter 11 and you read verse 7 of chapter 11, you read, "And when they shall have finished their testimony," which we dealt with last evening, the beast that ascendeth out of the abyss shall make war against them." Here we are, brothers and sisters and young people. We are in the 11th chapter of the Apocalypse, and John has not laid eyes on the beast up until this point of time. He knows nothing about the beast up until chapter 11. And the awful things that this beast is going to do, John has not got a clue as to how powerful, how awful, how monstrous this creature really is. So God says, John, we're going to now go from 1789, which is chapter 11, and we're going to go way back to 312. And I want to track you through the development of this creature so you understand what this monster really is and how it could wield such power in Revelation chapter 11. So therefore, we then are introduced, taken back in time, so John gets this, now I know what this creature is in chapter 11. So we go back to chapter 12 and we read about the great red dragon. And then we move into chapter 13, and this great red dragon morphs into the sea beast of chapter 13. And then the sea beast in chapter 13 morphs into the earth beast in chapter 13. And then the earth beast morphs into the image of the beast of chapter 13. And after John has had a journey through chapter 12 and chapter 13, he stands agog, absolutely agog at this monster that he has seen develop through these 2 chapters. And when you get to the end of chapter 13, you read that the beast, as we well know, has a number. It is a monster with a number. And John could well say, now I understand more fully what this creature is capable of and what it did in chapter 11. And when John sees the end of chapter 13, he sees a monster, a creature with a number. And John could very well be asking, will this monster be defeated? And if so, when? And then we're introduced to chapter 14. And this is why chapter 14 is interrupting chapter 11 through 16. We then come to chapter 14, brothers and sisters. And we find in chapter 14 that we're introduced to another beast. But this beast that we're introduced to is a little lamb. Here's another creature with a number. So in chapter 13, at the end thereof, there's a creature with 666. And here we come in chapter 14, and this little lamb, in the Greek, it's a lambkin in verse 1. A little, fluffy, cuddly, cute lambkin. And it has a number. 144. And therefore, brothers and sisters, we read that this little lamb will defeat this great creature. So the reason we have chapter 12 and chapter 13 is so John appreciates the beast of chapter 11. The reason we have chapter 14 there is to show that the creature that he's been introduced to will be defeated by another creature with a number. And the question that goes begging, brothers and sisters, after that is that if we've tidied up 12, 13 and 14 between these two chronological flowing chapters of chapter 11 and 16, why is chapter 15 there? Well, as we're going to see more fully in our exhortation on Sunday morning, chapter 15 there is brothers and sisters, because we've been dealing with a lot of history in chapter 11. We're going to be dealing with some history in chapter 16. And when we come to chapter 15, the shortest chapter in the Apocalypse, only 8 verses, we may not need chapter 15. But God introduces us to chapter 15, which we'll see Sunday morning, to show that the Apocalypse is more than just history. As fascinating as that history is, to show us how inspirationally accurate God's word is, chapter 15 shows us that we have got to see ourselves involved in the work of the scroll. So, the chronological flow between verse 14 of chapter 11 and verse 1 of chapter 16, interrupted by those 4 chapters, and they are there, brothers and sisters, for a very, very good reason. All right, now here's a chance for you to just take a couple of minutes and take a breath, because I've now got to find out why this computer is doing these things that it is doing. I tapped that screen before, I tapped that before, and back we came. So it's constantly dropping out. So why would it constantly be dropping out? Faulty connection, we think? Tired like me, perhaps? Straight in? Well, it should be good. Oh, well, we'll just keep tapping the screen, and it'll just remind us that it's time to take a little breather and a sigh as we go through. So therefore, brothers and sisters, what an amazing thing. So this connecting link between chapter 11 and between chapter 16, interrupted by those 4 chapters in the Apocalypse, which are there for a very good reason. And I might add this as well. Not only is chapter 12 and 13 there to show us more detail and John about the beast, but we would have no real clue about the holy city and the temple and the altar, which we needed chapter 13 for, 42 months. And we wouldn't have had any idea about the witnesses witnessing for 1,260 days, unless we had chapter 12. So chapter 12 and 13 are very, very important to be just adjacent to this 11th chapter. All right, brothers and sisters and young people, having said that, let's now launch into Revelation 16. Now, like chapter 11, chapter 16 culminates in a great earthquake. Chapter 11, the French Revolution. This great earthquake is something different altogether. And we see, brothers and sisters, in verse 18, there was voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. Now, you'll be able to see here that next to this third great earthquake, we've got the word Armageddon. That is not correct. And this was taken out of a Christadelphian. You know that Christadelphian book, I don't think it was the 7,000-year plan. It might have been, but I'm not really sure where I got that from. Anyway, a Christadelphian put this together, and it was a fantastic work. However, Armageddon is not the third great earthquake, because Armageddon is the last word of the 6th vial. Armageddon is the last action or the last event of the 6th vial. So Armageddon, yes, there'll be a literal earthquake at Armageddon, but Armageddon is not the third great earthquake. The third great earthquake is in the 7th vial, which are the epochs or the period between Armageddon, the 40-year period between Armageddon and the beginning of the millennium. Just wanted to clear that up, that Armageddon is the third great earthquake, and the third great earthquake is the 40-year period between Armageddon and the beginning of the millennium. So there's the climax of this 16th chapter of the Apocalypse. All right, now let's just do a broad brush overview like we did in chapter 11 of chapter 16, and then we'll come back and we'll look at some of the detail as we track through this. Now, we're considering, brothers and sisters and young people, the first 11 verses, the first 5 vials this evening of Revelation 16. We have the first vial there in verse 2, and the angel poured out his vial, the first angel, upon the earth. More about that in a moment. We then have, well, what we probably want to do, brothers and sisters, when we look at this first vial in a moment, what we want to do is to have a look in a little bit of detail about this expression, the earth, the beast, and the image. What does it mean, the earth, the beast, and the image? And are the earth, or is the earth, the beast, and the image, are they interlinked? Are they the same thing? What do they mean? So when we look at this first vial, we'll actually clear up who the beast is, what the image is, and what the earth is in this second verse. We then have in verse 3, the second vial is poured out upon the sea. And we read, therefore, that the sea became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. The blood of a dead man? Well, the blood of a dead man is congealed. The blood of a dead man does not flow. So what we've got here in this second vial is a cessation of the flow of blood, whatever that means. Now that's interesting, because in the second vial, you've got a cessation or a stopping of the flow of blood in order that we might have a copious flow of blood in the third vial. You look at the contrast, or look at the comparison. We'll see this link in a moment. Look at the third vial in verse 4. The third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. So what we're going to see in a moment is there's something about this sixth vial upon the sea where God says, stop the flow of blood, make it congeal, in order that there might be blood flowing with alacrity and celerity and copiously in the third vial. And you're going to see in a moment why God says that the second vial's got to be there to make something happen in the third vial. See that in a moment. Then we have our fourth vial poured out upon the sun. And power was given unto him, whoever he is, which we'll explore, to scorch men with fire. Wait till you see that, brother. If you haven't seen that, young people, if you haven't seen that, it's fantastic. To scorch men with fire. Well, it wasn't fantastic for the people who were scorched, but it's an amazing verse, let me tell you. Now, then we come to the fifth vial in verse 10, and the fifth angel poured out his bowl of judgment, a bowl or a vial, upon the seat, or as it should be in the Greek, upon the throne of the beast. The throne of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain. Just finishing off our little chart, God willing, tomorrow we're going to be considering the sixth and the seventh vial in our two studies tomorrow. And therefore in verse 12 we have the sixth angel poured out his bowl upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, etc., etc. And then we come, brothers and sisters, to the seventh vial in verse 17, and the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the aerial, into the political arena of the kingdom of men. And that would be, as we said a moment ago, the 40 years between Armageddon and the beginning of the millennium. So, brothers and sisters, let's just look at a very, very brief, again, broad brush of these seven vials, just to get our head around the large picture, and then we'll drill down into some of these details as we go. Before we do, I want to share with you one verse that sound alarm bells in our ears who live in these last days. This is the springboard into Revelation 16, Revelation 15 and verse 1. God is telling you and me to get our house in order, and bells are ringing with alarm as we read this first verse of chapter 15, and this is what we read. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvellous. 7 angels having the 7 last smitings, as it should be in the Greek. Brothers and sisters, we're being told in this verse, verse 1 of chapter 15, there are no more judgments to come. All the judgments that have been heaped upon the pagan Roman Empire, all the judgments with the German barbarians, all the judgments with the children of the desert, the Saracens, all the judgments with the Turks that have come to play, all the judgments that are found in that 11th chapter of Revelation. God says we're coming now to Revelation 16, and these are the last smitings. Brothers and sisters, let's get our house in order, because there's not much time. This is what God is saying as we read through this. Alrighty, now let's have a look again at a big picture, just to get our head around where we're going, and then we'll then plunge in to Revelation 16. Now the first bowl was poured out on the earth. Now I've got here 1789, beginning with the French Revolution. You'll find some writings, and I have got a problem with this, some brethren and a number of brethren, many brethren would say 1792. That's true, when France became a republic. But it was the French Revolution that began something that then would spill into the rest of Europe. And when it started to spill into the rest of Europe from the French Revolution, the momentum started to gather in 1792. So if you see in some books that the first vial began in 1792, don't have a problem. You'll see what I mean by that in a moment. We're saying, and I'll show you this, the French Revolution is the first vial poured out upon the earth. We then find that the second bowl is poured out upon the sea. This would be the British naval blockade, 1793. The reign of terror is in France through the French Revolution. The guillotine, chopping heads off left, right and centre, taking people out in leaky boats and killing them. All this was going on in France, and out come the Brits. Royal Britannia, on the waves. So that's the second bowl that's poured out. Our third bowl, brothers and sisters and young people, is 1796. And this is where Napoleon would come into his own, the Alpine campaigns. And in 1796, Napoleon is 27 years old, and he's Major Napoleon. Major General Napoleon. He's 27 years old, and off he's going to kick out the Austrians from the north of Italy and southern Switzerland. Major General, 27-year-old Napoleon. Well, then we come to the fourth bowl, brothers and sisters and young people, and we're now 1805. It's no longer Major General Napoleon, it's now Emperor Napoleon. And he has been an emperor for 1 year. And off he goes to deal with Vienna. Off he goes to deal with the Austrians. Off he goes, brothers and sisters, to deal with the sun. 1805 in his European wars. And then we find in 1808 the papacy would not escape. And Napoleon would deal with Rome and he would deal with the Pope. And he'd put him in prison and he'd get out. He'd put him in prison and he'd get out. There'd be this up and down of the Pope as Napoleon is dealing with him through his career. In 1808, this 5th vial that was poured out upon the throne of the beast, and his kingdom would be full of darkness. And then, brothers and sisters, we have 1820, and this 6th vial is poured out upon the Ottoman. Brothers and sisters, so what? So what? Who cares? Who cares about a bunch of French history that happened 200 years ago? God does. The angels do. We should. Because these brothers and sisters are stepping stones bringing you and me to this. Bringing you and me to this last bowl being poured out, where you and I will complete this work begun 200 years ago by the angels. You and I are going to complete these stepping stones when in Revelation 18 and verse 21, we, thus with violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down and shall be found no more at all. That's why, brothers and sisters, we get excited, because the angels were diligently busy through this period bringing the events ultimately leading to Armageddon and beyond. All through these first 5 vials, through the career of that man, there he is at his coronation wearing Caesar's crown. Oh, he wanted to be anyone like Caesar, like Alexander, like Constantine, and greater. There he is at his coronation in 1804. He was an unwitting instrument of the judgment of the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic Church. Do you know, brothers and sisters and young people, Napoleon saw himself as an instrument of providence. This is what he said about himself. I am the instrument of providence. She will use me as long as I accomplish her designs, and then she will break me as a glass. Oh yes, he was an instrument of providence, but not she. He. God would use him, and then in 1815 at Waterloo would break him as a glass, because he had finished with him. What an astounding thing, brothers and sisters. And so here he was, Napoleon. His campaigns brought untold suffering to Italy, to Austria and to Prussia. And it would be fitting vengeance for the blood of God's servants, as we saw in Revelation 11, and the anti-papal witnesses that we saw in Revelation 11, who had been persecuted mercilessly in previous centuries. What an astounding thing, brothers and sisters. So we begin Revelation 16 and verse 1 with these words. And the first angel went and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and there fell a grievous sore upon men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. So the first angel went and poured out his bowl of judgment upon the earth. Well, what earth is this? Well, brothers and sisters, this is the Roman earth. We looked at that verse, didn't we, in Revelation 11 and verse 4, where the God of the earth. So here we are, the Roman earth, and this vial will be poured upon that earth itself. You see, brothers and sisters, there is a map of the Holy Roman Empire, begun in 800 AD, Charlemagne. Charles the Magnificent. Karl, they called him, K-A-R-L. And there was the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire, the earth that we're talking about in Revelation 16 and the first vial. And here it is, the two horns of the earth beast of Revelation 13. You had an emperor, Charlemagne, and you had the Pope, the two horns of this empire. Interesting that a Frank, Charlemagne, a Frenchman, if you like, bought in the Holy Roman Empire. And it would be a Frenchman, albeit Napoleon being born in Corsica, but he certainly waved the French flag when he was the emperor. And a Frenchman would take out, a Frenchman brings it in, a Frenchman takes out the Holy Roman Empire. Now, a couple of hundred years later, brothers and sisters and young people, the Holy Roman Empire looked like this. You can see that the Holy Roman Empire is contracting eastward. And you can see France is emerging in their own right. Well, another couple of hundred years on in 1530, and you see the Holy Roman Empire, which is the earth of Revelation 16, upon which the first vial was poured. Here is the Holy Roman Empire there. And that pretty much was what the Holy Roman Empire looked like in the days of Napoleon. You can see France there. France is ruling in her own right. France was loosely connected to the Holy Roman Empire by a series of marriages, like Louis XVI, who married Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette being the daughter of the Austrian Empire or the Holy Roman Empire. So France was loosely connected, although ruling in her own right, loosely connected to the Holy Roman Empire through a series of marriages. So here we are. Revelation 16, the first bowl was poured upon the earth, upon the Holy Roman Empire, upon the earth beast of Revelation 13. The two horns, emperor and pope. Well, we read in verse 2 that this first vial poured upon the Roman earth, the Holy Roman Empire, of which Napoleon is going to take out, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore. In the Greek, brothers and sisters and young people, the word grievous sore is the Greek word poneros, which means hurtful. The word noisome means evil. So what we've got here is we've got an evil, malignant ulcer would fall upon the Roman earth, upon the Holy Roman Empire. The RSV translates this verse, a foul and painful sore came upon all those that loved the papacy, that wanted to be under the umbrella of the Roman Church. All of those that adored the Pope, all of those that gave their heart to Catholicism, a painful, grievous, foul sore would fall upon them. And therefore, brothers and sisters, there is, in red, outlined there, the Holy Roman Empire. And this ulcer would begin locally in France and would then spill with its malignancy, filtering all the way through the Holy Roman Empire. So beginning in France, now here we are, remember here we said the first bowl, 1789, but 1792 was when it began to gather momentum. Here we are, beginning in France with the proclamation of the Republic in 1792. The effects of the French Revolution spread, locally to start with, spread as a malignant ulcer throughout Europe. How did this ulcer get started? Why didn't the ulcer stay in France? Who made it spread? Well, Europe did. Actually, they brought it upon themselves. God moving the angels, no doubt, brothers and sisters. But look what happened. It began in France because of France's cooperation with the papacy in the persecution of the witnesses. Why didn't it stay in France? Well, brothers and sisters, in 1792, France declared war against Austria. If they'd have let sleeping dogs lie, well, it wasn't really a sleeping dog because France is coming out to declare war on Austria. But if France went out and had a bit of a war with Austria, things might have been okay. Well, when they declared war, the Duke of Brunswick then put the army of Europe in motion to invade France and to suppress the revolution. And by putting the army of Europe into motion, they copped it. They copped it, brothers and sisters. This great ulcer would not let them go, and it spread with that malignancy. Now, what then does it mean, the earth, the beast, and his image? Who's the beast? Well, we've said, the beast here in this verse is the earth beast. And there, brothers and sisters, is the beast. The beast is the Holy Roman Empire, and the capital of the Holy Roman Empire was Vienna. Who's the image? Well, the image in that verse, brothers and sisters, are the Papal States. And there are the Papal States. There's the Pope's kingdom. There's his land, one day to be taken away in 1870. And the capital of the image, the Papal States, was Rome. Rome and Vienna, the beast and the image. And this malignant ulcer would be felt upon the Holy Roman Empire. Millions would die as a result of the revolution and the wars in Europe. The Catholic Church in France would be overthrown, and there would be a shockwave of revolution that would move throughout Europe. Well, brothers and sisters, here's the map. And what God does, he puts a great big fence around that area. And he says to Napoleon, not that Napoleon was aware of this, God said to Napoleon, don't go out of that paddock. Your work is to stay in that perimeter. You tell that to Napoleon. Nah, I'm going to Egypt. And he did. Disaster. I'm going to go and invade England. Well, he thought about it twice. Disaster. I'm going to Russia. Don't do it, Napoleon. 500,000 of his soldiers died in the snow. Just because of the weather. Don't do it. Every time Napoleon strayed out of the perimeter within which God says that's the work I've raised you up to do, to bring blood to the Holy Roman Empire. Every time he strayed out of that perimeter, it was a disaster. But every time, brothers and sisters, he fought battles and campaigns within that perimeter, he was always victorious. Until Waterloo. Until 1815. What an amazing thing. Well, brothers and sisters, the second vial. Now, here's where God brings this vial upon the sea to make sure this second vial was put into place to make sure Napoleon stayed in his paddock. You see how that happens. God's bringing this second vial upon the sea to keep Napoleon roped up where he belonged. We'll show you how that works. The second angel poured out his bowl upon the sea. Now, here is the blockade of Europe. by the maritime forces, and Britain now would dominate the oceans. And the sea we're talking about there, young people and brothers and sisters, is the Mediterranean and the seas that surround Europe. See that? The bowl is poured out, and there's a great big rope, a great big chain that's put around Europe to keep Napoleon working in the area that God intended he should so work. And so what God did, brothers and sisters, to keep him in his paddock, was to raise up the tactical genius of Admiral Horatio Nelson. And what Nelson was on the sea, Napoleon was on the land. And what Napoleon was on the land, Nelson was on the sea. And Napoleon knew. He knew he's got to get rid of the Brits, these pesky Brits. I've got to get rid of them. He says, we must put all our strength upon the sea. We've got to destroy England, this big rope they've put around my nation or my empire, and then the continent will be at our feet. So, brothers and sisters, here was Admiral Nelson. Using the tactical genius of this man, he used him to defeat numerically superior forces. And by the Battle of Trafalgar, 1805, Britain completely dominated the seas and did so for the next 50 years. How does this work? What does this mean? God's used the second vial as a big rope to make sure Napoleon did the work that he had to do in the third, the fourth, and the fifth vials. I'll show you how this works. Have a look at this little time chart. Here's our first vial, beginning 1789, and the malignant ulcer would spread throughout the Holy Roman Empire. We come to our second vial, and our second vial, beginning in 1793, we go through to Trafalgar. Now, we make the point there that by the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, the Brits dominated and would so for the next 50 years. Let's push that out, shall we? Let's push that out for the 50 years. Now, look at this. The rope was there in place. The chain was in place. The barrier was in place to make sure the third, fourth and fifth vials were accomplished. So here's our third vial. Upon the fountains and the rivers of waters, 1796 through 1804. And the Brits are making sure he stays there. Then we have the fourth vial, poured out upon the sun, the political power of the Holy Roman Empire, Vienna. And the Brits are making sure that he stays there by overarching this. And then we have the fifth vial, where the bowl would be poured upon the throne of the beast. And again, you have the overarching Brits to make sure that would take place. I want to show you an example, brothers and sisters and young people, how this happens. How the second vial stopped the flow of blood in order that a copious flow of blood might take place through the agency and career of Napoleon with the third and the fourth and the fifth vials. Show you how this works. I'm not going to talk a lot about battles tonight. Just a little snippet about the Battle of the Nile in Abu Qir. In August 1798, there was a French fleet that was defeated by a smaller British armada commanded by Admiral Nelson at the Battle of the Nile at Abu Qir. Abu Qir is there, brothers and sisters. Now, here's Napoleon. I can relate to him because, him and I are almost on the same, vertical level. So here's Napoleon, brothers and sisters and young people. He says, I'm off to Egypt. So he goes down to Egypt with his men, and he kind of like dodges here, there and everywhere through the Mediterranean, trying to make sure that the Brits don't find out where he is. And he finally gets down to Alexandria. I'm going to Egypt. Why are you going to Egypt, Napoleon? I'm going to kick out the Mamelukes first, because they were ruling in Egypt. Get rid of the Mamelukes. I'm going to march down to Cairo. I'm going to take Palestine, and then I'm going to go to India. Why? Oh, because Alexander went to India. And I want to go there too. I want to be like Alexander. I want to conquer it. And I want to stop the trade between the Brits and the Indians. Oh, so here he comes. He comes down to Alexandria. He's got 47,000 men. And he marches down to Cairo, brothers and sisters, with these 47,000 men. And as they're marching down to Cairo, they did not know how hot it would be and how little water there would be. And literally, brothers and sisters and young people, thousands of Napoleon's soldiers put guns to their head and committed suicide. Awful. And he gets down to Cairo, and when Napoleon's down in Cairo, who should bob up on the ocean but Nelson? And Nelson comes to Abukir and sees all of Napoleon's ships, blew the lot of them to smithereens. And here's Napoleon in Cairo, stranded with 30,000 of his men who are left. Napoleon's got 30,000 men. He's got to get back to Europe. He's got to get back there. And he can't. He's got no ships to take him back. And so while he's down in Egypt, wanting to conquer this and be Alexander this and be that, while he's down there, brothers and sisters, a coalition of European states moved against France. What are you doing in Egypt? See what these coalition of states are doing. What are you doing in Egypt? God says, get back. Get back. And he can't take his men back. He's got to go back on his own. So he sneaks back to try and set all these affairs that are unravelling while he's doing a little jaunt down there where he shouldn't. You stay in your paddock and don't go out of that boundary that I put you in. What an amazing thing, brothers and sisters. Well, here's the third vial. And the third angel poured out his bowl upon the rivers and fountains of waters. Napoleon, you've got a job to do. And this would be the pouring out of judgment on this area of Piedmont, this area where it's just prolific with lakes and rivers and waters. And Napoleon is going to pour, or through the agency of God and the angels, he's going to pour his judgment out upon northern Italy and southern Switzerland. Now, what happened, brothers and sisters and young people, with this Alpine campaign, where Napoleon takes northern Italy and he takes the Pope as prisoner? What happened was this. Napoleon's going to come from Paris. He's going to go down to Toulon, pick up some people at Toulon. He's going to come up here into this area of the fountains and the rivers of waters. And here he is, brothers and sisters. Now, this verse we looked at when we started our class together this evening. This verse is particular and peculiarly associated with this third vial. Look at verse 6, Revelation 16. This is particularly related to the third vial, this area of fountains and rivers of waters. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and God is giving them blood to drink, for they are worthy. Why this area, brothers and sisters? And why is that verse related to this particular campaign? Because in that area, there were the Albigenses and the Waldensers, men and women who wanted to live a simple life, trying to give their hearts to Christ, trying to do the Bible readings after dinner, trying to live faithfully in Jesus and follow God, and they were ruthlessly persecuted by the Catholics. And in that area, blood flowed like rivers. And God said, because that area, with the Waldensers and the Albigenses, because that area was particularly awfully persecuted by the Catholics, God says they are going to receive blood to drink as they poured it out to men and women who wanted to live faithfully in the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, brothers and sisters, before we just go on a little very brief journey, we're not going to be a long journey, before we just go on a little brief journey with Napoleon on his campaign on the third vial, I want to say a couple of things about Napoleon. Now, you young people sitting down there in the audience, do you know anything about Napoleon? Do you know? Izzy, you know anything about Napoleon? You stay with me. You just watch this. I'm going to give you a little test after this, all right? All right? You just watch this. This is amazing. I want you to get the feel of this fellow because he's raised up by God as a vessel. Born in 1769 and died in 1821. 52. 52 he died. Well, here's Napoleon. When he was 9 years old, 1778, he enters a French military school. And when he goes to school, the other kids teased him. They kicked him around. They made fun of him because he spoke funny. He had this thick Corsican accent. And so because the other kids kicked him around and teased him, that caused Napoleon to withdraw into his books, particularly mathematics. In fact, one instructor said, "You're a very studious young man. You'd make a very good maritime officer in the British Navy." Could you believe that? No way! The Angels are not going to put him in the British Navy. He's out there to defeat or to conquer or to go to war with the British Navy. So here he is. He's this little 9-year-old. He's antisocial because he's been pushed away and kicked around. He's antisocial. Mind you, the few times that he was social, he dominated. Surprise, surprise. So here he is, brothers and sisters. He's 9 years old and he's at a French military school. When he's 16, in 1785, he's commissioned second lieutenant at 16 years of age. When he's 23, in 1792, he's promoted to captain. Now, where's the French Revolution? The French Revolution is there. Napoleon is 20 when the French Revolution breaks out. So here he is, 23 years old, 1792, when France became a republic, when the malignant ulcer starts to now permeate through Europe. Here is Napoleon, 23 years old, he's promoted captain. A year later, when he's 24, in 1793, he's made brigadier general, and he's 24. Now here, brothers and sisters and young people, is the reign of terror in the time of the French Revolution. And the people in France are sick to death of blood. They're sick to death of this Inquisition stuff. They're sick to death of the guillotine. And there's a groundswell in France. We want the Bourbons back. We want the monarchy back. We want Louis back. And this groundswell, there's a mob, brothers and sisters. There's a crazed mob, and they're sweeping through the streets of Paris. 25,000 of them sweeping through the streets of Paris. We want the monarchy. We want the Bourbons. We want Louis. We don't want the French Revolution anymore. And the people who were in power at that time saying, this is a crazed mob. Who's going to deal with the crazed mob? I know. We'll get Napoleon. He might only be 5'6", but he knows how to deal with a crazed mob. And so Napoleon comes along and he says to his mate, get a cannon. And his mate says, what do you want me to do with it? Stick it in the street. What are you going to do? Watch. And there's this crazed mob sweeping through Paris saying, we want the monarchy, we want the Bourbons, we want Louis back. They swept around the corner and Napoleon said to him, set it off. Boom! And they blew, brothers and sisters, the cannon through their own people, killed 200 people. Napoleon turned around to his mate and said, well, I guess we just gave them a whiff of grape shot, didn't we? Brothers and sisters, they've got problems on their border with the Russians, with the Prussians and with the Austrians. And here's Napoleon blowing his own people to smithereens. Well, when you do that in France, they promote you. And so here was Napoleon promoted to Major General, and he's 26. But it wasn't all war for Napoleon. There was love in the air as well. So he met Josephine. She was a widow, very old. She was about 37. She had 2 children. And she thought, time's running out. I better look around. And there she saw this young star, Napoleon, considerably younger than her, and they got married. Well, Napoleon spent a couple of nights with his new bride and said, sorry, Dale, that's all. I'm going. I've got a war to fight. See you later. I'll write. Now, there he is. He's 27 years old. He's Major General, and he's off to fight the campaign, the third vial. Up there in the area of Piedmont, up there where the Waldensers and the Albigenses were. There he is. Now, we'll just finish off our chart, brothers and sisters. When Napoleon's 30, in 1799, 10 years after the revolution breaks out, he seizes power. Now, just draw breath. How are you all going out there, by the way? Let me have a good look. You're pretty good, actually. Most of you are awake. This is very good. Brothers and sisters and young people, just sort of get your head around this. Between the time he goes off, says, goodbye, Josephine, I'm going to fight these Alpine campaigns, third vial. He goes off, and between here and here, he goes to Egypt. That's his trip down to Egypt, right? Remember, he got stranded down there with his 30,000 soldiers? It's between here and there. That's how the history fits in. All right, here he goes. Major General, and he's off in his campaign in the area of the fountains and rivers of waters. So he's got to come from Paris, and he's got to come down here to Toulon, and he's got to pick up the Italian army. So Napoleon gets down to Toulon before he goes up here to kick the Austrians out. He comes down here, brothers and sisters and young people, to Toulon. When he gets down there, he sees all these blokes down there, and he says, who are you? And they said, we're the Italian army. He said, where's your horses? They said, we ate them. He said, where's your guns? They said, we left them in the field of battle. You've never seen such a ragtag, forlorn, decrepit bunch of blokes. And here they are, they've eaten their horses, they don't know where their guns are. I'll be going back to Josephine. I'll be going, I'm not going with you guys, I'm going back home. But he didn't, brothers and sisters. He's got 3 months. 3 months to kick the Austrians out. He's got to whip these guys in again. And he did. By his rhetoric, by the electricity of his presence, he whipped this forlorn, decrepit bunch of blokes who ate their horses, couldn't find their guns. He whipped them into gear, and in 3 months, he went up there, brothers and sisters, and he kicked the Austrians out. and exercised the pouring out of blood on this area. And there was a battle there, and all through this area there was war after war after war, and battle after battle, until finally the words of God, and the third angel poured out his bowl upon the great, or the fountains, the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. All right, let's deal with the Pope. So, after defeating the Austrians in Lombardy, Napoleon turned on the papacy. He's coming down here to get the Pope. The Pope heard he was coming, and he got a ragtag bunch of people with pikes and pitchforks. They were no match for the Grande Armée of the French, and therefore the papacy was defeated at Faenza and Ancona, and Napoleon advancing on Rome, the Pope sued for peace. The Pope was given blood to drink. Well, brothers and sisters, he's coming home. He's done his bit over there in the northern part of Italy and the southern part of Switzerland. Napoleon's coming back. After his triumph in Italy, Napoleon is coming back to Paris. There's a corrupt, shaky, unstable government. Sound like South Africa. Sound like Adelaide. Sound like Canberra. There's a shaky, unstable, corrupt government in Paris, and they don't want Napoleon back. He's good, but he's dangerous. There has been Napoleon, brothers and sisters. He's been negotiating with the Pope over there. He's been negotiating with the King of Naples. He's been carving up land. He's been coding law. He's not just a military man. He's a politician. No, he's not. He's a government on the move. And he's dangerous. And they don't want him there. And therefore, the government is saying, he's coming back. The people love him. The people adore him. His men would do anything for Napoleon. He's dangerous. He's good, but he's so dangerous. We've got to give him a project. So the government says, go and invade England. So he goes down to the Channel, and Napoleon stands there on the Channel and he says, England. Yeah, good project. England. Now, what do I need? Oh, I need 600, 500, 200 flat-bottom boats. I need 100,000, 40,000 men. I need 200 flat-bottom boats, 40,000 men. How long do I need on the Channel? 12 hours? 6 hours. I need 200 flat-bottom boats, 40,000 men, 6 hours on the Channel. I need the Dutch and I need the Spanish. They're gone. The Brits have blown them to smithereens. I tell you, brothers and sisters and young people, if Napoleon put his toe in the Channel, the Brits would have blown his foot off. No way would he. He went back to Paris and he said, nope, can't be done. They said, well, go to Egypt. You see? So he went down to Egypt, and that's where he went after his third campaign. He goes down to Egypt. And while he was down in Egypt, brothers and sisters, after all that he had done in the area of Piedmont by kicking out the Austrians, after all that he'd done when he was in Egypt, with help from Russia, the Austrians retook Italy with a huge slaughter and suffered all the work he put into it. Undone, unravelled. Because God said, you do not belong down there. Get back in your paddock. And so, brothers and sisters, when he was down in Egypt, he forsook his army, as we mentioned before, his 30,000 men, returned to Paris, where by the turn of events he became the first consul after the coup d'etat of 1799. Well, how are you doing out there? All right? Still with us? You're a good bunch. How you going there, young people? All right? Still with us? Good. You know more? Thumbs up. What's your name, young man? Who? Well done, Christopher. Thumbs up. That's what I like to see. So now you know a little bit more about Napoleon, do you? Very good. I'll give you a little test after. No, I won't, Christopher. I won't give you a test. I won't give you a test. Oh, brothers, it's all right. Young people, brothers, it's not long to go. Hang in there. It'll be a lot more exhortation. I promise you, a lot more exhortation tomorrow. But I love history anyway. If you don't, so I'm so sorry about bad luck, actually. All right, brothers and sisters. Now, this was the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the end for Napoleon. Napoleon knew that 1,000 years before there had been a man called Charlemagne who went to Rome and crowned himself. Napoleon's going to do the same, but he's not going to Rome. Napoleon's going to say to the Pope, you come over here to Notre Dame in Paris. You come here. I'm not going to Rome like Charlemagne did. I'm better than him. You come here and you watch and sit there and watch. And therefore, brothers and sisters, Napoleon consolidated his power and by a series of plebiscites created a dictatorship, and finally he crowned himself as emperor in 1804. And that painting would be familiar with many in this room. There is the painting of Napoleon who's about to crown himself in Notre Dame in Paris. Now look over there. There's his mum. I've actually stood in that very spot where he crowned himself. And I looked up there and I saw where his mum was sitting. There's his mum. She wasn't there. She wasn't coming. I'm not coming to your coronation. I don't like Josephine. She's not going to be my empress. No, I'm not coming. And so the painter came to Napoleon. The painter said to Napoleon, your mum's not here. He said, paint her in. And the painter said to Napoleon, what will she say? She will thank me later. Paint her in. He might have been 5'6", but he had the ego of an 8-foot giant, brothers and sisters. He did what he liked. Now you see the Pope there. Pope's got his hand out there, kind of like he's doing something there like that. He didn't do that. When Napoleon said, you sit there, Pope, you sit there, and you put your hands on your knees and don't move. Well, when the painter came to paint it, Napoleon said, well, I did ask him, maybe, you better make it look like he's doing, make him look like he's doing the sign of the cross or something. He did what he liked, brothers and sisters. He called the shots. I tell you what, if they had Photoshop, he'd be using Photoshop all over the place to show how good he was. What an egomaniac was Napoleon. Well, brothers and sisters, here now we come. Now, we haven't got long to go now. We won't go over time at all. I just want you to just drink this. This is an astounding vial. I want you to drink this in. Here's the fourth vial. The fourth angel poured out his bowl upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. This would be Napoleon's Austrian campaign, and Napoleon would enter Vienna, and Austria would be defeated. Now the sun, it is a symbol of political power, as many of us here would know. If you were to go to Psalm 89, verse 36, the Lord Jesus Christ will be the sun. The Lord Jesus Christ will take political power to himself as the S-U-N and rule the world in righteousness. Revelation 8 verse 12, the sun was eclipsed for a third of the day and a third of the night. The political power of Rome. We know Revelation 12 and verse 1, I think, back to front, inside out, upside down. In Revelation 12 and verse 1, there was a woman in heaven clothed with the sun. Moon under her feet, 12 stars around her head. So the sun is representative of political power. And the sun of Europe, the political driving power of Europe, had been the Holy Roman Empire since 800 AD. Now listen, brothers and sisters, stay with me. Young people, Charlemagne brought in the Holy Roman Empire. Napoleon is going to take it out. And it's all about the sun. Revelation 12 verse 1, the woman clothed with the sun, Napoleon, Charlemagne. What has Napoleon, Charlemagne and Revelation 12 verse 1 all got to do together? Oh, this is amazing. Here, brothers and sisters and young people, is the cathedral in Aachen, built by Charlemagne. Aachen, the birthplace of Charlemagne. Charlemagne, Napoleon, Revelation 12 verse 1, the sun. If we go inside, well, here's Aachen, brothers and sisters. Charlemagne was born in Aachen. He built this cathedral in Aachen. There it is in Germany. Now, if we go inside that cathedral, you're going to see what Charlemagne, Revelation 12 verse 1 and Napoleon have all got to do together. When you go inside that cathedral, brothers and sisters, notwithstanding the amazing stained glass windows, there is a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and wearing a crown of 12 stars. Charlemagne put that there. That's Revelation 12 verse 1. The sun. And under that sun, 32 emperors of the Holy Roman Empire were crowned. Oh, brothers and sisters, drink that in. Let that wash over us. And Napoleon's coming to take out what Charlemagne brought in, and it's all about taking away the sun, the fourth vial. What an amazing thing. Well, from 1438 through 1806, the rulers of the Holy Roman Empire came almost invariably from Austria, and the ruler of Austria was regarded as the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, which was the sun. Nearly finished. And men in this fourth vial men would be scorched with fire. The fourth angel poured out his vial upon the political powerhouse of the world, which was the Holy Roman Empire, and power was given to Napoleon to scorch men with fire. You know, brothers and sisters and young people, if you were reading from the British tabloids at this time, you'd be reading news headlines, fire, Napoleon, fire. And when Napoleon set up his cannons and ringed his cannons, it was like fire, all this fire and smoke. And the whole of the English tabloids, they're obsessed with this man of fire. Well, you find this idea of a man of fire comes out with what we know in history as the Battle of the Pyramids. This is when Napoleon was down there in Egypt coming to kick out the Mamelukes, when he did his little jaunt down there and got stranded with his 30,000 men. When he was down there in Egypt, brothers and sisters, there was this campaign that lasted 2 hours. 2 hours, the Battle of the Pyramids. Actually, it was fought in a vegetable patch. So, carrots, lettuces, beetroots, cucumbers. You couldn't have it written in the history book, could you? And Napoleon was victorious at the Battle of the Vegetable Patch. You couldn't do that. Wouldn't sound very romantic at all. But there were pyramids in the distance, so that's it, the Battle of the Pyramids. But there they are amongst the cucumbers and the lettuces, fighting these Mamelukes. Brothers and sisters and young people, fire? Well, Henrietta Marsh wrote the story of Napoleon, and she said this: many of the Mamelukes threw themselves into the Nile to our battle in panic of flight. Many of the Mamelukes were cut down by the pursuing French, and those Mamelukes who escaped carried to all parts of Egypt the fame and terror of Sultan Kabir, the King of Fire. What an amazing thing, brothers and sisters. And there's a historian, just like Belloc, we saw last night, when he said about the witnesses, they remain an ever-powerful, watchful body for the 100 years. Here's another historian. Was the angel guiding that hand? Oh, brothers and sisters, what an amazing thing. Well, we now come to the fifth vial, bringing our study to a conclusion. And the fifth angel poured out his bowl upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain. And this would be Napoleon's Italian campaign, and the Papal States would fall and Rome would be taken. So the bowl would be poured out there on Rome. So brothers and sisters, young people, in summary, in 1809, Napoleon took the Pope prisoner. The Roman state was abolished. The Pope was banished from Rome. But they still blasphemed. Apart from all that, they still blasphemed and did repent not of their deeds. So after, brothers and sisters, 1809, they never learnt the lesson. After 1809, the wicked scroll of the deeds of the Roman Catholic system still kept going on and on and on for all men and women to see. For in 1824, they circulated, or the idea that if anybody talks about the Bible without Romish interpretation, they denounce them as a poisonous person. They repented not. And then, brothers and sisters and young people, in 1854, in came the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. Worship Mary. They repented not. And brothers and sisters, in 1870, when the Pope was kicked out of his kingdom by Victor Emmanuel II, they brought in the dogma of papal infallibility. They repented not. Therefore, brothers and sisters, the papal throne had been abolished. Napoleon's work was done. His further campaign simply added to the absolute misery already experienced by the worshippers of the beast and his image. Napoleon would die in 1821. Defeated was Napoleon on the 18th of June at Waterloo in 1815. Exiled to the remote Atlantic island of St Helena, Napoleon died at 52 in 1821. And John Thomas was 16 when Napoleon died. No wonder Brother Thomas wrote with such passion. As a teenager, not in the truth, he read the English tabloids. He saw and heard firsthand of the career of this man as a young boy. And when he came to the truth, he was set on fire. Young people, be set on fire by what we see when we see the angels at work. And therefore, brothers and sisters and young people, if the French Revolution had not happened, if the wars in Europe did not take place, If the church and state had not been separated, you and I would not be here to freely open our Bibles today. As awful as the French Revolution was, Revelation 11, as awful as those wars in Europe were, Revelation 16, if they didn't happen, by the grace of God, you and I would not be able to open our Bibles freely because church and state had been separated. We wouldn't, by the grace of God, be able to call ourselves brothers and sisters in Christ. What a wonderful thing, brothers and sisters. And so, God willing, tomorrow we will have a look at our next study together, now really focusing on a vial that concerns you and I. So God willing, brothers and sisters, we'll look tomorrow and our first study, A Way Prepared, the sixth vial.